Good evening, everybody. Bonsoir, mes amis. My name is Jamil Jivani. I am the Member of Parliament for Bowmanville-Oshawa North. We appreciate you joining us very much. It's nice to have you here. I'm just going to get things kind of kicked off. This is our first event. We've done 6 already. This is the first one outside of Ontario. So we greatly appreciate the McGill Conservative Campus Club for hosting us. We give them a round of applause. Thank you very much, guys. So because we've done a bunch of these, we sort of have like a rhythm to how we approach this, which is the theme of our discussion is how can we restore the promise of Canada? And we ask that question knowing that people have all sorts of different answers and we want to hear everybody's answers. We don't come here to kind of pretend we know everything, and certainly with the unique policy challenges in the country right now that uniquely affect young people, we know there's a lot we need to learn and there's a lot we need to hear from people, and that's why we do this. So a couple things before, I'm also forgot, how did I miss him? Of course, you're also joined by the great MP Ned Couric, who represents the riding of Hamilton East Stony Creek. I'm going to give my answer to what restoring the promise of Canada looks like, and as will MP Couric. Just a couple things off the top. People ask me all the time what this is about, like when we go to campuses, what is our goal, what are we here for? It is exactly as you see in front of you. Like we drove here from Ottawa, leaving this afternoon, and we will drive back to Ottawa tonight, specifically because we want to talk to you. It's not that much more complicated, and that's what we're looking forward to. So let me give you my sense of what restore the North or restore the promise of Canada means. There are 3 things that sort of come to mind for me immediately. The first one is that we restore some sense of fairness and opportunity in this country. Right now, the federal government is greatly influenced by what I refer to as a victimhood hierarchy. So instead of assessing where citizens, regardless of their identity, need help, support, empowerment, it is often a skewed sense of reality that shapes public policy. To give you a very practical example of what I mean, the Senate of Canada, the National Bank of Canada, Movember Canada, the Canadian Mental Health Foundation, all have published reports in recent months and years outlining the tragic situation that very many young men find themselves in, whether it's related to opioid addiction, unemployment, homelessness, victims of crime, high school graduation rates. There's overwhelming statistical evidence that young men in our country need help. The federal government just put out a budget that had the largest deficit in Canadian history, $80 billion deficit. And in that high deficit budget, not a single plan, strategy, targeted initiative to help young men in our country. Now you ask yourself, how do you have all these organizations and other bodies of government making a very clear point that we have a crisis that requires attention, and yet we have a government in Ottawa that for over a decade now has been completely unwilling to acknowledge it or do anything about it? And I would say that that is a reflection of the hierarchy of how our citizens are divided up and how it is determined who needs an extra hand up in our society. It's not based on need, it's not based on evidence, it's not based on data, it's based on a very superficial examination based on what I would call a fairly twisted sense of our history, that instead of looking at who we are today and who needs help today, it's based on a way of looking at correcting historical narratives that are just frankly just not true in how people live their lives right now. I've written an open letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney, which certainly encourage anybody who would like to sign it, you're welcome to. And I wrote this letter particularly showing him the data that the federal government has access to and requesting his help in trying to do something about this. To me, that's an example of what restoring the North is, which is that we value the citizenship of our people as our common bond, and that we evaluate public policy on the basis that every citizen is equal, and therefore their struggles must be taken seriously by their government that they pay taxes to. A second example of what restoring the North means to me would be correcting and fixing our immigration system. I am the son of an immigrant to this country from Kenya, a grandson of immigrants from Scotland and Ireland. Like probably most people in this room, there is immigration in my family history. And yet we are in a situation right now where immigration policy has made it almost impossible for people to enjoy the same opportunity to better their lives and provide a better life for their children as my father, my grandfather, my grandmother had. There were 1.4 million people who entered our country through various visa programs and streams in 2024. If you talk to people who entered our country, as I do every day, you will find out that they often came here with a hope that they would have opportunity and a chance at a better quality of life, and have found that hope to be extinguished in many cases because life has been very hard for them. The reason it's hard should actually not be that complicated to figure out. Often it is just a matter of supply and demand. There are only so many jobs, so many houses, so many hospital beds, so many schools. And when you have that kind of abrupt increase in a country's population in such a short period of time, public services and economic opportunity lags behind, and lots of people struggle as a result. So to me, getting immigration numbers to a sustainable level where we can say with sincerity and integrity that we have a system of social mobility in this country, not just for newcomers, but also for young people who grow up here and are looking for jobs and entry-level positions to get their careers started. Fixing that is a big part of restoring the North. And the last point I'll make before I turn it over to Ned, we have a crime problem in this country. It is actually funny because sometimes, I would say for years, it was a debate to even acknowledge this. There was efforts to downplay this over and over and over again. In the last election, people came to some form of a consensus of acknowledging that crime has gotten out of control. And now in Ottawa, the question is just what do you do about it? We don't actually have to convince people anymore that there is a problem. Our view has been that a big part of the criminality increase has actually been the result of a very small number of people across the country who have been, kind of classified as violent offenders, repeat offenders, committing a very large portion of crime. And the reason why the justice system has failed to support frontline police officers in getting that crime problem under control is because of something that was introduced by the federal government called the principle of restraint in our criminal code. What that did was it instructed judges, many of whom frankly have activist agendas in how they apply the law and how they do sentencing. It gave them the ability to justify the least restrictive bail conditions for people who are arrested, regardless of how many times they're arrested, regardless of the severity of their offense. The Liberal government introduced a bill that they claim is solving this problem of lax bail conditions. But their conditions don't actually get rid of the principle of restraint. And so the core problem, or one of the core problems in our criminal justice system remains unaddressed. And in my view, restoring some sense of justice in this country is very, very important. I probably don't need to tell you, if you take a cursory look at the news on a regular basis, you'll see examples of people who've been victimized by crime. And very, very often you'll find that the person who perpetrated the crime was out on bail. Or had been arrested before, often for similar crimes, and not held accountable for his or her actions. So those are three things that come to my mind when we talk about restoring the promise of Canada. I'm going to pass it over to Ned now to give you his perspective before we open things up to hear from you.